Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Lost Journal's Secret. Chapter 1. The Shadow over Cabot Cove. The morning sun rose over Cabot Cove with the same gentle warmth Jessica Fletcher had always loved. The air smelled of pine needles, sea salt, and the faint trace of last night's rain settling quietly into the soil. It was, by all accounts, the kind of peaceful day when nothing more dramatic than a seagull stealing a fisherman's sandwich should occur. But Jessica knew better. Peaceful mornings in Cabot Cove often ended in anything but peace. She stood on her porch with a steaming cup of tea, eyes drifting across the coastline as gulls circled lazily overhead. October had painted the town in amber and gold, and the shifting breeze carried promises of a crisp New England autumn. Jessica had planned to spend the day rewriting the first act of her next mystery novel. She felt the plot needed more tension, but the universe had other ideas. Her phone rang inside the cottage, and she stepped in to answer. "Jessica Fletcher," she said cheerfully. "Jessica, thank goodness you're home," came the recognizable voice of Eve Carmichael, president of the Cabot Cove Historical Society, a position she took far too seriously. "What's wrong, Eve?" Jessica asked, though the frantic tone told her she wasn't calling to chat about next week's quilting auction. "It's Andrew," Eve blurted. "He didn't show up this morning. He was supposed to open the museum at 8. I stopped by when I saw the lights still off. His car is there, but he's not answering. And Jessica..." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Something feels wrong." Andrew McCormick was the Historical Society's newest volunteer, a young historian from Boston who had moved to Cabot Cove only 3 months earlier. Polite, reserved, and slightly awkward, Andrew had quickly gained attention with his meticulous research and his sweeping knowledge of colonial New England. Eve adored him. Others thought he was hiding something. Cabot Cove residents tended to be suspicious of newcomers, sometimes with good reason. "I'll be right there," Jessica promised. The museum stood at the end of a narrow lane, housed in a restored 19th century ship captain's home. When Jessica arrived, Eve was pacing anxiously near the entrance, clutching a ring of keys in her trembling hands. The morning fog had begun to thicken again, swirling around the wooden structure like a shroud. "Jessica," Eve rushed forward. "I didn't want to go inside alone." "That's quite all right," Jessica said gently. She placed a reassuring hand on Eve's arm. "Let's take a look." The front door opened without resistance, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, the museum was dim, the only light filtering in through tall windows draped in heavy curtains. Jessica inhaled the familiar scent of old books, varnished wood, and time-worn artifacts. "Andrew," Jessica called, "are you here?" Silence. Jessica scanned the room. A stack of cataloguing papers lay on the front desk, neatly arranged as usual. A mug of coffee sat beside them, cold and untouched, the faintest hint of steam long since vanished. Andrew was known for never starting work without his coffee. Its presence and temperature disturbed her. They moved deeper inside. As Jessica walked past the maritime exhibit, something caught her eye. A glass display case containing a Revolutionary War-era compass was slightly ajar. "Eve, did you open this?" Jessica asked. "No," Eve answered quickly. "Andrew would never leave a case unlocked, never." Jessica closed the case gently. "Let's check the office." They walked down a narrow hallway to Andrew's office door, which was half open. Jessica nudged it wider. The small room appeared undisturbed, papers in tidy stacks, reference books arranged alphabetically, a half-eaten granola bar on the corner of his desk. But his computer screen glowed with a single document titled The Whitaker Journal, Transcription Notes. Jessica leaned closer. She had heard of the Whitaker Journal before, an elusive artifact rumored to contain the personal writings of Captain Elias Whitaker, an 18th century sailor believed to have smuggled goods along the Maine coastline. Some historians considered Whitaker a folk hero. Others viewed him as a glorified pirate. "You don't think he found it, do you?" Eve whispered behind her. "The journal?" Jessica murmured. "I doubt it. It's been missing for centuries." Still, something about the open display case gnawed at her. "Let's check the archive room," Jessica said. They moved toward the back of the house, their footsteps muffled by aged carpeting. The door to the archive room was closed. Jessica turned the knob, locked. "Eve, do you have the key?" Jessica asked. Eve sifted through her ring and handed it over. Jessica inserted the small brass key and felt it give. The door swung open. What they saw froze them in place. The room was a mess. Filing drawers yanked open, binders overturned, boxes ripped apart, ancient maps scattered across the floor. It looked as though someone had searched frantically for something they were desperate to find. And then Jessica saw it. A single shoe, Andrew's shoe, lying on its side near the fallen shelf, as though it had been pulled off in struggle. Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. "Eve, call Sheriff Metzger," she said calmly but firmly. "Oh my goodness, do you think—" Eve stammered. "I don't know," Jessica said. "But Andrew didn't leave this room by choice." Eve fumbled for her phone. Jessica crouched to examine the floor. Something glinted beneath a torn map. She reached in and lifted it carefully. A broken watch, Andrew's watch. The glass was cracked, and the hands had stopped at 9:17 p.m. Jessica's mind raced. Andrew had been at the museum last night, alone. Was someone after the mythical Whitaker Journal? And had Andrew stumbled onto something he wasn't meant to find? As Jessica examined the shattered watch, she noticed something else, a faint trail of mud leading toward the back exit. She followed it to the door, which hung slightly open, and stepped outside into the cold morning air. The backyard led to a wooded slope descending toward the harbor. The mud trail continued for several feet, before abruptly disappearing on the grass. Jessica straightened slowly. Someone had taken Andrew, and they had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Behind her, Eve's voice wavered as she spoke into the phone. "Sheriff!" "It's Eve Carmichael. You need to come to the museum, immediately." Jessica turned her gaze toward the distant line of trees, her instincts prickling with the unmistakable tension she knew too well. A crime had occurred in Cabot Cove, and it was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Whispers of the Whitaker Journal. Sheriff Mort Metzger arrived at the museum 20 minutes later, grumbling as he stepped out of his patrol car. His morning coffee sat half-finished in the cup holder, and he clearly resented being pulled into what he initially assumed was another historical society panic attack. But the moment he saw Jessica's face and the state of the archive room, his expression changed. "All right," he sighed, hands on his hips. "Looks like we've got ourselves a real situation." Jessica briefed him on everything: the missing volunteer, the ransacked archives, the broken watch, the unlocked display case. Mort listened with his usual mix of skepticism and concern, but he took notes dutifully. "So you're thinking someone grabbed Andrew last night?" he asked. "I'm thinking," Jessica replied carefully, "that he encountered someone who didn't want him to talk." Eve, still trembling, added, "But who would do such a thing? Andrew is the sweetest boy. He can barely look someone in the eye, let alone cause trouble." Mort raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes the quiet ones cause more trouble than you think." Jessica didn't entirely disagree. Andrew's awkward manner, almost evasive at times, had sparked rumors in town. Some believed he'd left Boston for reasons other than a peaceful research sabbatical. Others believed he was chasing something specific, something valuable. Mort crouched to inspect the mud trail near the back exit. Heavy prints, but not deep enough for someone carrying a body, more like dragging. Jessica nodded. "And someone tried to wipe away the end of the trail. See how the grass has been brushed?" Mort grunted. "Sloppy." Eve shuddered. "This is horrible." "Simply horrible." Jessica touched her shoulder gently. "We'll find him, Eve." After Mort taped off the archive room, Jessica stepped aside to examine the items scattered across the floor. Captain Whitaker's maps, naval logs, and cargo ledgers formed a chaotic sprawl. Many documents had been pulled out but not taken, suggesting someone was looking for a very specific item. Jessica noticed a narrow wooden drawer half pulled from a cabinet. Inside were microfilm reels labeled with dates from the late 1700s. She scanned the labels and frowned. One was missing. And not just any reel, the one labeled Whitaker. Personal papers, unverified. "Mort," she called. "Something isn't adding up." He walked over. "What now?" "Someone was searching for this particular reel, and it's gone." Mort scratched his head. "So maybe Andrew took it?" Jessica shook her head. If he had found something that important, he wouldn't have left the archive door locked behind him. And he certainly wouldn't have left his watch broken on the floor. Mort let out a soft whistle. "You're right. So someone else came here last night." "And they knew exactly what they were looking for," Jessica said. Eve wrung her hands. "But why would anyone care about some pirate captain's old notes?" Jessica's gaze sharpened. "History, Eve, is rarely just history. Sometimes it hides truths people would kill to uncover or protect." After the initial investigation, Mort sent Eve home to rest and assigned a deputy to guard the museum. Jessica, however, wasn't ready to leave. She walked through the rooms again, retracing Andrew's steps the night before. The Maritime Gallery felt especially eerie now. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the ship models, rope coils, and glass cases. Jessica paused at the unlocked display containing the antique compass. She leaned down and examined the edges. There, a faint smudge of something metallic. She touched it lightly. Gun oil. Her heartbeat quickened. Someone carrying a weapon had opened the case. But why? The compass itself was not particularly valuable beyond historical interest. Unless... Jessica turned the compass over gently. A tiny inscription ran along the base, weathered, almost invisible. "WJ," her breath caught, Whitaker Journal. "Mort," she called again. He hurried over, muttering, "I swear, Jessica, you're finding more clues in 10 minutes than I've found in 10 years. "Look at this inscription," she said, turning the compass toward him. He squinted. "WJ, so what? It could be a marker, a clue left by Captain Whitaker himself. Maybe the compass was used to hide the location of his journal." Mort's eyes widened. "You think this journal is actually real?" "I think someone believes it is," Jessica replied. "And Andrew might have gotten too close for their liking." Jessica left the museum and walked the narrow path behind it that led toward the harbour. The sun had climbed higher, melting the last of the morning fog. The trail was quiet except for rustling leaves and distant waves slapping against the docks. Halfway down the slope, Jessica stopped. Something glimmered beside a cluster of rocks. She stepped closer. A torn fragment of fabric, dark navy, stiff with dirt, snagged on a branch. It looked like part of a jacket. Andrew's jacket. Jessica tucked it into her pocket and continued. At the bottom of the slope, the trees cleared, revealing a small service road running behind the museum. Tire tracks cut through the mud. Fresh ones. 2 parallel grooves sharply imprinted. "A vehicle was parked here last night," Jessica murmured to herself. Someone waited. She looked around again. No footprints, no discarded items. Whoever had abducted Andrew was careful, practiced, not a random intruder, a professional. Jessica felt a sinking heaviness in her stomach. "What were you involved in, Andrew?" She walked back toward town, needing to think. Jessica's next stop was the Hilltop Cafe, Cabot Cove's unofficial center of gossip. If anything strange had been seen near the museum last night, someone here would have noticed. The bell over the door jingled as she entered. A few locals sat at tables, sipping coffee and reading newspapers. Phyllis Grant, the cafe owner, waved her over. "Morning, Jessica. You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Jessica said gravely. "Something far more troubling." Phyllis poured her a cup of tea. "Never a dull moment with you around." Jessica forced a tired smile. "Phyllis, did anyone mention hearing cars or seeing people near the museum last night? Anything at all?" Phyllis tapped her chin. "Funny you ask. Eddie Granger said he saw a black SUV driving slowly down Harbour Lane around 9. Thought it was some tourist lost in the dark." Jessica's pulse quickened. "What kind of SUV?" "Didn't say, but he mentioned the windows looked tinted." Tinted windows, a quiet approach, gun oil, a missing microfilm, an inscription referencing a legendary lost journal. Nothing about this was random. Someone had come to Cabot Cove with a purpose. Jessica stepped back outside and gazed toward the museum in the distance. The crisp Maine air stung her cheeks, but she hardly noticed. Andrew wasn't missing. He was taken, and whoever had taken him was desperate to get their hands on something linked to Captain Whitaker. Something hidden for centuries. Jessica took a deep breath. If she didn't uncover the truth soon, Andrew might not live to be found. Chapter 3. Secrets Beneath the Surface. Jessica returned home that afternoon with a head full of questions and an uneasy feeling that Cabot Cove was walking straight into the heart of a mystery much older than the town itself. She set her coat on its hook, brewed a fresh pot of tea, and carried her notebook to the dining table. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by unanswered questions, she relied on one thing: order. She opened her notebook and wrote 1. Andrew missing. 2. Archive room ransacked. 3. Microfilm reel stolen. 4. Compass engraved WJ. 5. Black SUV seen near museum. 6. Trace of gun oil. 7. Jacket fabric on slope. She tapped her pen lightly. Whoever abducted Andrew knew where to look, she murmured, and they knew how to get in without being seen. But one thing bothered her more than the rest. Andrew's transcription notes titled The Whitaker Journal. Why start the document if the journal was a myth? Had he already found a piece of it, or had someone confided in him? Jessica stood abruptly. There was one person in town who knew every rumor tied to old Cabot Cove legends. Captain Daniel Haggerty, retired fisherman, local storyteller, and self-appointed guardian of Whitaker law. If anyone understood the journal's darker history, it was him. The wind picked up as Jessica made her way across town to Haggerty's weather-beaten house near the wharf. The porch sagged slightly under her feet as she knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing the captain's grizzled face, framed by a thick white beard and eyes that narrowed suspiciously. Well, well, he grunted. Jessica Fletcher, come for a sea story?" "Something like that," Jessica replied warmly. "May I come in?" He grumbled something under his breath, but stepped aside. The living room smelled of pipe smoke, salt water, and old nets. Maps covered the walls, nautical trinkets sat on every shelf. And in the corner stood a glass case containing a ship's wheel, so old its wood had splintered from decades of storms. "Tea?" he offered. "No, thank you, Captain. I've come because something has happened at the museum." Haggerty puffed on his pipe. "That new lad, Andrew?" Jessica nodded. "He's missing." The captain took the pipe from his mouth, slowly. Figured trouble might follow that one. Always poking around the archives, asking questions he shouldn't. "About the Whitaker Journal?" Jessica probed. Haggerty's eyes hardened. "Aye." She leaned forward. "Captain, I need to understand, is the journal real?" He hesitated for several seconds, then, without a word, he walked to an old chest near the window, rummaged through it, and pulled out a folded parchment. He handed it to her with a solemn expression. Jessica unfolded it carefully. The parchment displayed an old map, hand-drawn, bitterly aged. It marked several sections of the main coastline, but one area, circled in faded ink, caught her attention. "Captain, what is this?" "That," he said, lowering himself into his chair, "is the last known map of Captain Elias Whitaker's preferred smuggling route, passed down through 3 generations of Haggertys." Jessica stared at the circled point on the map, a rocky inlet just north of Cabot Cove. "Legend says Whitaker kept a record of every transaction," Haggerty said. "Names, dates, goods, buyers, and enemies. If the journal were found, it'd expose families that still hold power today. Old money, old secrets." Jessica absorbed that carefully. So someone might want to keep it hidden. "Or someone wants to sell it," the captain muttered. "Artifacts like that fetch a fortune, especially if they contain scandalous history." She looked back at him. "Captain, did Andrew speak to you?" "Aye, came by last week. Asked about Whitaker's burial site, about missing entries in the museum's files, about a final voyage Whitaker supposedly never returned from." He leaned closer. But the boy asked one question that chilled me. "What was it?" He asked if Whitaker ever had enemies who'd kill to keep their secrets buried. Jessica felt a cold wave wash over her. "And what did you tell him?" she asked. "I told him the truth," Haggerty said. "The Whitaker Journal isn't just a sailor's diary, it's a list of sins." Jessica thanked the captain and stepped outside. The sky had grown darker, heavy with the threat of rain. She tightened her coat and walked toward the harbour, her thoughts spinning. If the journal held explosive secrets about powerful families, then the person behind Andrew's disappearance could be someone with far more resources and far more to lose than she initially imagined. Her phone rang. "Jessica?" Mort's voice came through, clipped and tense. "Mort, what is it?" "We found the black SUV." Jessica stopped walking. "Where?" "Abandoned by Miller's Point. No plates, no registration. Clean as a whistle. Whoever left it knew what they were doing." "Any sign of Andrew?" "No, but we found blood on the ground." Jessica's breath caught painfully. "How much?" "Hard to tell yet. Forensics is on the way. Jess, it doesn't look good." She steadied herself. "I'm coming." Miller's Point was a jagged cliff overlooking the Atlantic. The sheriff's car lights flashed in the gloom as Jessica arrived. Mort stood near the edge with a grim expression. "It's right over here," he said. The SUV was wedged between 2 boulders, doors unlocked, interior cleaned down to the bare plastic. Not a single fingerprint, smudge or trace of fabric remained. But next to the cliff's edge, a dark stain spread across the gravel. Blood. Jessica kneeled, examining the size and pattern. Not a pool, she said softly. A smear, dragged, not splattered, not pooled. You think he's alive? Mort asked. I think, Jessica answered carefully, that whoever took him needed him conscious long enough to ask questions. Mort looked at her sharply. Interrogation? Possibly. Mort rubbed the back of his neck. This is way out of the normal Cabot Cove trouble. It is, Jessica agreed, which means whoever did this is running out of time and patience. She stood and looked toward the forest beyond the cliff. But they're not gone, not yet. What makes you say that? Mort asked. Jessica pointed to the ground. Fresh footprints, 2 sets, led into the forest, one set large and deep. The other, barely noticeable but present. Andrew's. Mort's hand dropped his holster. They're still on foot. Or hiding nearby, Jessica said. The air grew colder around them. For Andrew's sake, she whispered, we have to find them before nightfall. Chapter 4. The Forest Trail of Danger. The wind whipped across Miller's Point with a growing ferocity as Jessica and Sheriff Metzger stood at the mouth of the forest. The trees clustered together like old sentries, their branches clawing at the sky. The footprints, one heavy and deliberate, the other light and uneven, disappeared into the darkness between the pines. We should wait for backup, Mort muttered, though his hand stayed firmly on his holster. Jessica shook her head. Mort, if Andrew is injured and being moved, waiting could cost us time we don't have. Mort grunted. I know, but I swear one of these days you're going to get us both in trouble. Jessica offered a faint smile. We've been in worse places. Mort sighed heavily. Fine, but stay behind me. They moved forward, their path illuminated only by the sheriff's flashlight and the faint light seeping through cloud cover. The forest floor was damp, the air thick with the scent of pine sap and decaying leaves. Every crack of a twig snapped Jessica's nerves tighter. The footprints continued for several yards, weaving between fallen logs and brush. Mort crouched and shone his light over the ground. Footprints stop here. Great. Jessica scanned the area. No, they don't stop. They change direction. She pointed toward a patch of trampled ferns. A faint trail led off at a diagonal, barely visible. Mort followed her gaze. How do you see this stuff? I'd have walked right past it. Jessica shrugged. Years of writing mystery novels. You start noticing details other people miss. They continued deeper, the forest tightening around them. An owl hooted somewhere above, followed by the sound of scurrying animals. Jessica felt the cold creeping through her coat, the air growing heavier. Mort suddenly held up a hand. Wait! Jessica froze. What is it? Mort flicked his light ahead. Between the trees, something metallic glinted, half buried under a mound of pine needles. Jessica's heart sped up. What is that? Mort pushed forward and knelt. He brushed the debris aside, revealing a small metal container, rusted at the edges but recently disturbed. He opened it. Inside lay a folded scrap of paper. Mort carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was small, precise, almost academic. Jessica leaned in. If you're reading this, I've been found. A.M. Jessica inhaled sharply. Andrew. He left this. Mort scowled. He knew he was being taken. He must have dropped this here on purpose. Jessica took the paper. It means he's alive and conscious, long enough to think clearly. Mort stood. We'd better move. Whoever took him is headed somewhere deeper. They pushed on, guided by the faint disturbances Andrew tried to leave. A broken branch here, a scrape on a tree trunk, even a torn thread caught on a thorn bush. He's leaving us a trail, Jessica said breathlessly. Smart boy. Smart or desperate? Mort muttered. The forest finally opened into a clearing. In the center sat an old cabin, its roof slanted, wood warped, and windows boarded over. A relic from an era before Cabot Cove became a tourist haven. Mort's voice dropped. "I haven't seen this place in years. Thought it got torn down." Jessica felt a prickling sensation up her spine. Perfect place to hide someone. As they approached, Jessica noticed subtle marks on the ground, fresh grooves in the dirt, like someone had dragged heavy objects inside. Mort motioned for silence and crept toward the cabin wall. Jessica followed. They listened. Nothing. Mort tested the doorknob. Locked. He turned to Jessica. "Stay behind me." With one hard kick, the door burst inward. Jessica braced for an attack, but the cabin interior was empty. Dusty floorboards, a broken chair, a rotting table. A lantern sat cold in a corner. "Looks abandoned," Mort said, disappointed. Jessica scanned the room. "Maybe they were here earlier." She bent near the hearth. "Mort, look." Black ash, still warm. Mort touched it carefully. "Someone was here within an hour." Jessica's eyes traveled to the wall. Something faint had been scratched there, a hurried scrawl. She stepped closer. It read, "Not alone." Jessica whispered, "Andrew wrote this." Mort stiffened. "He's trying to warn us." Jessica took a step back. "Mort, if he wrote 'not alone,' then whoever took him wasn't working alone. There are multiple people involved." "Meaning what?" he asked. "Meaning Andrew didn't stumble upon one criminal. He stumbled upon a conspiracy." Something crackled outside, twigs snapping under weight. Mort swiftly pointed toward the side window. "Someone's out there." Jessica's pulse accelerated. A shadow drifted past the cabin wall, then another. Mort mouthed silently. "Two people." Jessica nodded. Her breath caught. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Mort whispered, "Get behind the table, now." Jessica ducked behind the broken table, her heart throbbing in her ears. Mort crouched low, hand on his firearm. A set of boots appeared in the doorway. A man stepped inside, tall, stocky, dressed in dark clothing, face obscured by a hood. He scanned the room with a tactical flashlight. Jessica recognized the type instantly. Trained, controlled, alert. Not some random thug. Behind him came a second figure, leaner, quicker, equally covered. Jessica's instincts surged. These men weren't searching, they were checking. Mort remained perfectly still. The larger man kicked the wall in frustration. "He's not here! They moved him!" The second man hissed. "Then we track them again. The boss won't wait." "Puh, boss." Jessica's blood went cold. Someone with influence, was orchestrating this. The two men stepped back outside. Jessica waited until their voices faded. Only then did Mort exhale. "We're in deep trouble, Jess. We need to get back to town," Jessica said quickly. "Now!" "But Andrew—" "We won't help Andrew if we're caught next," she interrupted. "Those men aren't amateurs, they're organized." Mort cursed under his breath. "All right, let's move." They slipped out the back, moving quietly until they were deep in the forest again. Jessica paused only once, to glance back at the cabin's silhouette. "Hold on, Andrew," she whispered. "We'll find you." Chapter 5. The Hidden Truth in Andrew's Past. Jessica and Sheriff Metzger emerged from the woods just as twilight settled over Cabot Cove, coating the town in an eerie lavender haze. The street lamps flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the quiet roads. Jessica felt the weight of the last few hours pressing on her chest. Andrew was alive. She believed that, but the danger surrounding him was escalating faster than either she or Mort fully understood. They walked toward Mort's patrol car, parked by Miller's Point. Mort leaned against the hood, catching his breath. "Jess," he said, rubbing his temples, "this whole thing is turning into a nightmare. Armed men, cleaned vehicles, secret hideouts. Cabot Cove isn't built for this." "No," Jessica agreed, But we don't get to choose what arrives at our doorstep. Mort exhaled sharply. Whoever these men work for, they're professionals. This isn't about stealing museum artifacts. This is bigger. Jessica looked toward the darkening horizon, which means Andrew found something someone desperately wants. And that someone might not be local, Mort added. Jessica gave him a meaningful look. Or they might be someone very local, someone with resources and secrets to hide. Mort frowned. You think one of Cabot Cove's own is behind this? I think the Whitaker Journal, if it truly exists, contains information powerful enough to ruin reputations. She paused. And we both know that the oldest families in this town built their fortunes on complicated foundations. Mort grumbled. Great. Another case where everyone's related to someone important. Jessica smiled weakly. Welcome to Maine. Before returning home, Jessica insisted on one more stop, Andrew's rented cottage on Elm Street. They needed to understand who he was before they could find where he'd been taken. Mort grumbled, but agreed. The cottage was small, tucked behind a row of birch trees. A single lamp glowed through the front window. That alarmed Jessica. Andrew never left lights on. Mort knocked. No answer. He radioed dispatch for permission to enter on grounds of welfare concerns, and once it came through, he unlocked the door. The interior was neat, almost unnaturally so. Books lined the shelves in perfect order, sorted not alphabetically but by subject and year. Maps of New England's coastline covered the far wall. A desk in the corner held piles of research notes. Jessica moved slowly through the room, taking it in with sharp, practiced eyes. "Look at this," she murmured, lifting a folder labeled Whitaker, Final Voyage Hypothesis. Mort stood behind her. "You think he was onto something?" "Oh, I'm certain of it." Jessica opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of old shipping manifests, hand-drawn sketches of coastal passages, and Andrew's handwritten notes. One page stood out, a sketch of Whitaker's compass, the very one Jessica had examined earlier. Under it, Andrew had written, "Compass may contain hidden mechanism, key to journal location." Jessica inhaled sharply. So Andrew believed the compass wasn't a simple artifact. He thought it held a secret. Mort looked uneasy. "Well, that explains why someone broke the case open." Jessica nodded. "And why Andrew became a target." She flipped the next page. A newspaper clipping fell out. Mort picked it up. "Boston, 2 years ago. Museum intern injured in storage vault collapse." Jessica read the article quickly. Andrew's name appeared halfway down the column. "Mort, this wasn't a collapse. Look here, police unable to confirm cause." And Andrew claimed he didn't remember the moments before the incident. Mort's face tightened. "You think he was attacked?" "Someone wanted him to stop digging," Jessica said. "The pattern is too familiar." "And he left Boston." "But the threat followed him," Mort muttered. Jessica sighed. It seems Andrew didn't just come to Cabot Cove to volunteer, he came to hide. Mort ran a hand through his hair. "Jess, this just keeps getting worse." Jessica scanned the rest of the documents. One page caught her attention immediately, a letter addressed to Andrew but unsigned. It read, "If you found the first clue, the rest must remain hidden. Your discovery puts you in danger. Trust no one. E." Jessica read the letter twice, then held it out to Mort. "E, first name, last name?" Mort asked. "Possibly," Jessica replied. "Or perhaps Elias, as in Captain Elias Whitaker." Mort stared. "Jessica, Whitaker died 2 centuries ago." Jessica smiled faintly. "Mort, I'm not suggesting the captain wrote this note, but someone using his initial might be continuing his story or protecting it." Mort crossed his arms. which means Andrew wasn't working alone. Someone was helping him. Jessica suddenly noticed a small lockbox beneath Andrew's desk. She pulled it out. Mort retrieved a pocket knife and popped the latch. Inside was a USB drive and another folded note. Jessica opened it. "If something happens to me, the drive explains everything. Do not let them find it." A.M. Mort's face paled. "We need to see what's on that drive." Jessica nodded. "But not here. Whoever took Andrew may come back." 15 minutes later, Jessica and Mort sat at Jessica's dining table. She plugged the USB drive into her laptop. A single encrypted file appeared, whitakertruth.docs, protected by a password. Mort groaned. "Please tell me you know how to guess museum code words." Jessica thought for a moment. "The compass, the initials, the map, the letter." She typed, "WJ compass, access denied." She tried, "Whitaker 1781, denied." Mort leaned over. "Try something personal." Andrew seemed obsessed with Whitaker's final voyage. Jessica typed, "Final voyage." The file opened. Mort exhaled. "You're kidding me." Jessica clicked the document. At least 20 pages of research, diagrams, timelines, and scanned maps appeared. Andrew had discovered something extraordinary, something dangerous. A section titled "The Truth Behind Whitaker's Disappearance" caught Jessica's eye. She read aloud, "Whitaker did not die at sea. He hid the journal inland after exposing illegal trafficking among prominent colonial families, whose descendants still hold wealth and political power. Someone has been searching for the journal for decades. They know I'm close." Mort's jaw tightened. "This is bigger than anything we imagined." Jessica continued, "The compass contains the final clue. Once aligned with the correct landmark, it reveals the journal's burial site." She scrolled further. Andrew had written, "I'm being followed. If they take me, the compass must be protected. The journal cannot fall into their hands." Jessica closed the laptop slowly. "More, they don't want Andrew, they want the compass. And whatever the compass reveals." Mort stepped back. "And we already know they're not afraid to kill for it?" Jessica looked out the window into the darkening night. "We need to find that journal before they do." Chapter 6. The Compass of Whitaker. Jessica barely slept that night. Her mind replayed every detail: Andrew's notes, the armed men in the forest, the missing Whitaker Journal, and the mysterious compass with the faint WJ engraving. She sat at her kitchen table long after midnight, a single lamp glowing over her notes. By morning, fog had rolled into Cabot Cove in a thick silver blanket, swallowing rooftops and muffling sounds. Jessica wrapped her scarf tight and stepped outside. She needed to return to the museum, specifically to that compass. It was no longer an artifact, it was a key, and Andrew had believed it was central to everything. Mort insisted on accompanying her. When he arrived, his expression was weary but determined. "Morning, Jess. I checked with my deputies. No sign of those men returning to the cabin or to the SUV." "That means they're planning something," Jessica replied. "Great," Mort muttered, because this wasn't stressful enough. The museum was colder than usual, as though the ransacked archive room had drained the warmth from the building. Deputy Collins guarded the front door, nodding grimly as they entered. Jessica walked straight to the maritime gallery, her eyes fixed on the compass inside the display case. Mort unlocked the case with a pair of gloves in hand. "Let's handle it carefully," Jessica said. Mort nodded and lifted the compass. The brass casing gleamed faintly in the morning light. Jessica held it gently, turning it over. "The inscription is barely visible unless you look closely," she murmured. Whitaker wanted only someone who knew what to look for to recognize it. She pressed her finger along the seam. "And the metal feels uneven here." Mort leaned closer. Hidden compartment? I believe so. She tapped lightly. Hollow. Jessica carefully twisted the bottom plate. It resisted at first, then gave way with a soft click. Mort sucked in a breath. Jess, you're kidding me! Inside the compass was a small circular panel engraved with symbols, triangles, wave lines, and coordinates faintly etched around the rim. Jessica's pulse quickened. This isn't a compass, it's a cipher device. A what? Mort blinked. A navigation puzzle. Whitaker must have used this to conceal the final location of his journal. Mort scratched his chin. So how do we solve it? Jessica studied the symbols again. I don't think we solve it here. The symbols look like topographical marks, indicating a real location. She pointed. See this? A cliff marking. And here, curved lines representing tidal flow. Mort frowned. Jess, this looks like the coastline. Exactly, Jessica whispered. She closed the compass. Whitaker didn't trust paper maps. He built the last clue into this device. Which means, Mort said slowly, the people chasing Andrew want this, not him. Not exactly, Jessica said. They need him because he figured out how to interpret the puzzle. Mort shook his head. So what do we do now? Jessica took a deep breath. We follow the clue. They returned to Jessica's home to analyze the cipher more closely. She placed the compass under bright light and expanded Andrew's research file on her laptop. Andrew had suspected the compass corresponded to a specific landmark. In one of his diagrams, he had circled 3 coastal points. Miller's Point, Old Quarry Cove, Widow's Bluff. Jessica compared the symbols on the compass to the map. Miller's Point matches the cliff marking, she said, but not the tidal lines. Could it be Widow's Bluff? Mort asked. Jessica shook her head. No, that area is too flat. Mort leaned over. Old Quarry Cove, then. Jessica smiled. Look, these symbols align with the cove's inlet and the old abandoned quarry tunnels. Mort groaned. Of course, dark tunnels full of unstable rock. Why wouldn't the treasure be there? Jessica chuckled softly. Consider it a tradition. Mysteries do love their dramatic settings. Before heading out, Jessica reviewed Andrew's file again. One section, titled Quarry Observations, caught her attention. She read aloud. Rock formations match compass symbols. Tidal schedule crucial. Access point hidden behind collapsed stone wall. Mort's eyes widened. Jess, if Andrew already went there, someone may have followed him. Jessica felt her stomach tighten. Which means the quarry might not just hold the journal, it might be where they're holding Andrew. Mort grabbed his jacket. Then we're going now. The road to Old Quarry Cove twisted through evergreen groves and rocky hillsides. By the time they reached the cove, the fog had thickened again, drifting low over the ground like ghostly waves. Mort scanned the area cautiously. Quiet. Too quiet. Jessica stepped toward the rocky shoreline. Andrew mentioned a collapsed stone wall. They walked along the cliffside until Jessica spotted a section where the rocks had unnaturally shifted outward. Beneath them, a narrow opening gaped like a mouth. Mort, she called softly. Over here. He approached with flashlight drawn. Looks like someone disturbed it recently, Mort observed. Jessica crouched and found fresh scrape marks on the rocks, signs of movement. This is it, Mort grumbled. I hate tunnels. Then I'll go first, Jessica said. Absolutely not, Mort hissed. I'm the sheriff. And I'm the one who sees details you miss. Mort sighed. Fine, but if anything jumps out at us, you're explaining this to the state police. Jessica smiled. Deal! They ducked inside. The tunnel was narrow, damp, and cold. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing like slow heartbeats. Jessica kept one hand along the wall, feeling for changes in texture. Mort whispered. "Do you hear that?" Jessica stopped. A faint sound drifted from deeper inside, the rhythmic, muffled beat of someone. "Footsteps," she whispered. Mort stiffened. "Multiple. Coming this way." Jessica's heart pounded. She grabbed Mort's arm. "Back! Lights off!" They pressed themselves into a shadowed recess just as two figures approached, the beam of their flashlight slicing through the tunnel like knives. Jessica recognized the voices immediately. The tall, stocky man growled, "The boss wants the compass. If the kid doesn't talk..." His partner answered coldly, "He'll talk. Pain makes people talk." Mort clenched his jaw. "Jess, they have Andrew." She squeezed his hand. "Quiet." The men walked past, their voices fading as they moved toward the entrance. Jessica exhaled slowly. "They're guarding something deeper in." Mort nodded grimly. "Then deeper we go." Another 20 yards in, the tunnel widened into a cavern. A faint lantern glowed from the far end. Jessica approached silently. Then she froze. Andrew was there, hands tied, bruised, slumped against a crate, but conscious. His eyes widened when he saw her. Jessica placed a finger to her lips and whispered, "We're getting you out." But as she stepped toward him, a voice boomed behind her. Well, been Mrs. Fletcher." Jessica spun around. From the shadows stepped a man she did not expect. A familiar Cabot Cove face, someone respected, trusted. Her blood ran cold. "You?" she gasped. The traitor smiled. "Welcome to the truth, Jessica." Chapter 7. The Betrayal in the Cavern. Jessica stared into the dim lantern light, her heartbeat thundering in her ears as the familiar figure stepped fully out of the shadows. Thomas Ridgely, Cabot Cove's polished, influential town councilman, fundraiser, philanthropist, a man whose smile could charm tourists and whose family name was stamped across half the town's buildings. But tonight, in the cavern's cold glow, his warm persona peeled away like a discarded mask. "Thomas," Jessica whispered, disbelief tightening her throat. "You?" Ridgely smirked. "I suppose it was only a matter of time before you put yourself in the middle of this, Jessica." Mort's hand moved toward his holster. Ridgely raised his palm calmly. "I wouldn't do that, Sheriff." From the darkness above, two laser dots from rifle scopes settled on Mort's chest. Mort froze. "Great. Snipers in a cave. That's a new one." Jessica kept her voice steady. "Thomas, what is this? What does Andrew have to do with you?" Ridgely stepped forward, brushing dust from his tailored coat, as though the cavern offended his sense of style. "You always were perceptive, Jessica. Andrew found something he shouldn't have, something my family has protected for generations." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "The Whitaker Journal." Ridgely's expression flickered, anger mixed with fear. "That journal contains records of every illicit deal between Whitaker and several prominent colonial families, smuggling, bribery, trafficking, crimes that shaped fortunes still alive today." Jessica's stomach tightened. "Crimes connected to your ancestry?" Ridgely's smile sharpened. "Bingo." Mort glared at him. "So you abducted Andrew, sent armed men after him and ransacked the museum, all to protect your reputation." Ridgely leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Not my reputation, Sheriff, my legacy, everything my family built, from shipping to banking to politics, would crumble if Whitaker's journal comes to light." He turned toward Andrew, who sat bruised and exhausted, yet defiant. "This boy," Ridgely continued, "was clever, too clever. He deciphered the compass's hidden mechanism, found the first clue, and he was close, too close, to uncovering the burial site." Jessica stepped protectively in front of Andrew. "And instead of facing the truth, you chose violence." Ridgely shrugged without remorse. History is written by the victors or the survivors. Jessica's anger rose. Whitaker hid the journal because he wanted the crimes exposed. Ridgely let out a low laugh, and he failed, but his little toy, he nodded toward Jessica's pocket, gives someone like me a chance to finish what my ancestors started. Mort growled, "So what now? You kill us and pretend none of this happened." Ridgely's eyes gleamed. Not kill, just disappear. He gestured toward the cavern's far side, where the tide surged through a hidden opening beneath the rocks. The sea is an efficient eraser. Jessica's pulse quickened. The incoming tide was rising fast. In 60 minutes, this cavern would flood. Mort silently murmured, "Jess, we're running out of time." Ridgely signaled his men with 2 sharp clicks. 2 black-clad guards stepped forward. "Tie them," Ridgely ordered. The first guard grabbed Mort, twisting his arms behind him. Mort struggled, but was overpowered. The second guard approached Jessica. She stepped back calmly, eyes steady. "Thomas, you don't have to do this." "You're right," Ridgely said coldly, "but I want to." The guard reached for Jessica's arms, and at that exact moment, a deafening crack echoed through the cavern ceiling. Everyone froze. Pebbles rained down, followed by a groaning rumble, the sound of shifting stone. Mort yelled, "Back! The tunnel roof is unstable." A massive slab of rock broke loose, crashing between Jessica and the guard. Dust and debris exploded through the cavern. Both guards stumbled, momentarily blinded. Jessica seized her chance. She grabbed Mort's dropped flashlight and swung it hard against the guard's wrist. The man yelped, losing grip on her. Jessica ducked behind a support beam. Mort kicked his own guard off balance, using the moment to grab the fallen rope and shove him into a pile of crates. Ridgely cursed furiously, "Stop them now!" The cavern trembled again, another ominous shift of rock. Ridgely's men hesitated, glancing nervously at the cracking ceiling. Jessica used the distraction to sprint toward Andrew. He lifted his head weakly. "Jessica." She untied the ropes binding his hands. "Save your strength. We'll get you out." Mort called out, "Jess, more guards coming." Jessica helped Andrew stand. "Mort, we need to move, now!" The cavern shook harder. The tide surged louder, pushing water into the floor crevices. Ridgely shouted, "You fools! Grab them!" But fear had cracked his perfect command. His men were scrambling, torn between orders, and the instinct to survive. Jessica led Andrew toward the tunnel entrance, Mort covering their escape. Ridgely lunged forward, grabbing Jessica's arm. "Give me the compass!" Jessica twisted free. "It doesn't belong to you!" Ridgely snarled, pulling a concealed knife. "Then none of you leave here!" Mort forced himself between them, tackling Ridgely with a powerful shove that sent the blade skittering across the floor. "You're done, Ridgely!" Mort roared. Ridgely whipped around with blind rage. "I built this town. It lives because of my family's name." "No," Jessica said calmly. "It lives because of the truth." The cavern boomed, another chunk of ceiling crashing down. Water rushed at their ankles. Ridgely backed away, cornered between falling stones and rising tide. Mort grabbed Jessica's hand. "Jess, we need to go!" She nodded and helped Andrew up the tunnel incline. Behind them, Ridgely screamed, "You don't understand. The journal will destroy us all." But the words faded as the tunnel twisted. A final thunderous collapse echoed through the cavern. Then silence. Mort, Jessica, and Andrew pressed forward in darkness as water surged behind them. 10 minutes later, they stumbled out of the tunnel into the foggy daylight of old Quarry Cove. Andrew collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. Jessica steadied him. "You're safe now?" Mort scanned the entrance. "The others, the collapse sealed the tunnel. We'll send a rescue team, but it might take hours to clear." Jessica looked toward the cliff, heart heavy. Ridgely's men chose darkness, but we will choose the truth. Andrew weakly whispered, Jessica, there's something you need to know. The compass, it doesn't show the journal's location alone. Jessica frowned. What do you mean? Andrew looked up with terrified eyes. It leads to a second secret. Jessica felt the cold fog prickle her skin. A secret Whitaker never intended anyone to find. Chapter 8. The Last Secret of Captain Whitaker. The fog along Old Quarry Cove thickened as if nature itself wished to hide what was about to unfold. Jessica supported Andrew with one arm while Mort secured the area with his flashlight drawn. They were safe for the moment, but Jessica could not forget Andrew's final words inside the cavern. A second secret, he had whispered. Now, seated on a driftwood log near the rocky shore, Andrew took slow breaths as the cold air filled his lungs. His face was pale, bruises shadowing his cheek, but his determination had not dimmed. Jessica knelt beside him. Andrew, you said the compass leads to something else, something Whitaker never intended anyone to find. Andrew nodded weakly. Yes, something hidden deeper than the journal. Mort crossed his arms, wary but curious. Let me guess. Another cursed artifact, a lost treasure, a secret lair? Andrew shook his head. No, something worse. Jessica placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Start from the beginning. We're listening. Andrew swallowed. When I was researching Whitaker's final voyage, I found inconsistencies, not just missing entries, but deliberate omissions. Dates that didn't match shipping records, transactions erased or heavily altered. At first I thought Whitaker was hiding his own crimes. But he wasn't, Jessica murmured. No, Andrew said. He was hiding someone else's. Jessica's eyes narrowed. The family's? Yes, Andrew replied. And not just Ridgely's ancestors. Several powerful families used Whitaker as their intermediary. He transported illegal goods, smuggled people, laundered silver. When Whitaker realized the full scale of what he was enabling, he threatened to reveal everything. Mort, and that's when they turned on him. Exactly, Andrew continued. Whitaker wasn't just running away from enemies. He was burying something he believed could end their power. Jessica leaned in. The journal. Andrew nodded. But the journal was only half the truth. Whitaker feared someone could destroy it or twist its meaning. So he created a second safeguard, a sealed chest containing original letters, maps, and names he never included anywhere else. Mort's eyebrows shot up. A second archive? Yes, Andrew whispered, hidden somewhere only the compass can reveal. Jessica exhaled slowly. And Ridgely didn't know? No, Andrew said. He believed the journal alone was the threat. He never realized Whitaker built a second layer, one that contained the darkest secrets. Jessica looked toward the ocean. The waves lapped quietly against the rocks, as if waiting to swallow any truth left exposed. Andrew, she said gently, did you figure out where the second archive is hidden? Andrew hesitated. I think so. Mort tensed. Where? Andrew reached into his torn coat pocket. Miraculously, despite everything, he had held onto a small notepad. He flipped to a page showing a crude map, coastlines, tide lines, and a set of intersecting points. Jessica recognized the markings instantly. They matched the cipher symbols inside the compass. Mort squinted. I don't recognize that place. You wouldn't, Andrew said. It's not on modern maps. Jessica's breath hitched. It's an island. Andrew nodded. A tiny one. Submerged most of the year, only visible during extremely low tides. Mort blinked. That sounds unbelievably dangerous. Andrew managed a faint, tired smile. Smugglers weren't known for choosing convenient hiding places. Jessica studied the map again. How did you find it? Whitaker's final notes, Andrew replied. His last coded messages spoke of the twin stones and the rising path. I found references to a pair of sea stacks off the coast, rocks that stand side by side like sentinels. The compass, when aligned with them, pointed directly to the location of the second archive. Jessica took the compass from her coat pocket. The brass felt impossibly cold. "And that," she whispered, "is why Ridgely wanted it." Mort sighed heavily. "Jess, we can't go chasing islands that disappear under the tide. The state police are on their way, and this whole area is about to turn into a crime scene." Andrew's voice grew urgent. "Sheriff, listen to me. If we don't retrieve the archive, others will come." Ridgely wasn't acting alone. There are people, powerful people, who knew Whitaker's secrets were threatened. They won't stop with him. Jessica exchanged a grave look with Mort. They both knew Andrew was right. "We may not get another chance," Jessica said. Mort rubbed his forehead. "Why do I let you talk me into these things?" Jessica smiled. "Because you know I'm right." Mort groaned. "Fine, but we do this smart. No tunnels collapsing on us this time." Andrew pointed to the horizon. "Low tide begins in about 20 minutes. That's our window." The walk along the rocky shoreline was treacherous. Jessica kept one arm around Andrew while Mort scanned the cliffs with growing irritation. "There," Andrew whispered, pointing. Two enormous sea stacks rose from the water, tall, jagged monoliths like ancient guardians. Jessica held up the compass and twisted the cipher plate gently. A click echoed through the air. The compass needle spun, then stopped, pointing toward a narrow strip of land emerging slowly as the tide receded. Mort whistled. "Well, I'll be—" Jessica stepped forward. "This is it." They moved carefully across the exposed shoreline. The rocks were slippery, covered in seaweed and barnacles. Mort nearly slipped twice and cursed loudly each time. At the base of the sea stacks, Andrew pointed to a seam in the rock. "The compass aligns here." Jessica held it up. The needle vibrated, then stilled. "Here," she murmured, pressing her palm against the stone. A groaning sound echoed. Mort stepped back. "Jess, what did you do?" A panel of rock shifted, revealing a small stone cavity. Inside lay a watertight iron chest, aged but intact. Jessica's breath caught. "Whitaker's second archive?" Andrew exhaled shakily. "We found it." Mort knelt beside the chest. "Let's get this thing out before the tide comes back." Jessica and Andrew joined him, pulling the chest free. It was heavier than expected, dense, filled with the weight of centuries. Jessica ran her hand over the iron surface, feeling the cold history beneath her fingertips. Mort grinned tiredly. "Well, Jess, looks like you've solved another mystery." Jessica smiled gently. "Not solved yet, but the truth is finally surfacing." Andrew looked at her with gratitude and awe. "Jessica, you saved my life." She shook her head softly. "No, Andrew. You saved it by refusing to stop asking questions." He smiled. "And now the truth can finally come out." Jessica looked toward the horizon as the tide began to rise again. "Captain Whitaker," she whispered, "your secrets are safe no longer."